My parents refused to help when I was sick. Now they expect me to bankroll and raise my golden brother's abandoned kids. Sup, Reddit. 6 years ago, my parents told me to figure out my own medical crisis while they went on vacation. Last week, they showed up demanding I fund raising my brother's kids after he abandoned them via email. I gave them their own words back, and what followed was a complete shit show that exposed exactly who these people really are. I'm 31 male and haven't spoken to my parents in almost 6 years. Not a single word. No birthday calls, no holiday texts, no awkward run-ins at family gatherings, because I stopped going to those too. Complete radio silence. The breaking point? Type 2 diabetes diagnosis when I was 25, between jobs, and my insurance wouldn't cover the medication I literally needed to stay alive. But before we dive into that particular disaster, let me paint you a picture of my family dynamics, because this whole situation makes way more sense when you understand the pattern. My parents, Richard and Patricia, are your stereotypical suburban middle-class couple who spent 30 years building what they considered a comfortable retirement. Dad worked in manufacturing management, climbed the ladder over decades, ended up making decent money. Mom did accounting for a regional hospital network. Steady work with good benefits. They retired at 62 with a paid-off house in a nice neighborhood, 2 cars that were only a few years old, and enough retirement savings to take annual cruises without even blinking at the cost. They weren't struggling financially. Not even close. They had that comfortable middle-class retirement where you can afford pretty much anything you want within reason. The kind of retirement most people dream about. No mortgage, no debt, pension coming in, 401k sitting there as backup. They were set. My older brother Wyatt is 39, 8 years older than me. That age gap meant we were never really close growing up. By the time I was starting middle school and actually developing a personality, he was already moved out and doing his own thing. We existed in the same family but lived basically separate lives. Growing up, I always felt like the practice kid. You know how some families have that dynamic where the first kid gets all the attention and the second one just kind of exists? That was us. Wyatt was the golden child who could do no wrong. Every milestone he hit was celebrated like he'd cured something major. Meanwhile, I could bring home straight A's and get a pat on the head and a, "That's nice, dear." The favoritism was blatant, but nobody acknowledged it. When Wyatt needed money for anything, car repairs, rent assistance, whatever, my parents were there immediately with open checkbooks. When I needed help, suddenly it became a teaching moment about self-reliance and personal responsibility. I remember being 16 and needing $200 for a school trip. It was this educational thing all my friends were going. I'd been looking forward to it for months. My parents said no. Too expensive. They didn't see the value in it. I needed to learn that not everything in life gets handed to you. 2 weeks later, Wyatt asked for $800 to help with his security deposit on a new apartment. They gave it to him same day. When I pointed out the inconsistency, Dad said it was different because Wyatt was an adult with adult responsibilities. I was just a kid asking for vacation money. That kind of thing happened constantly. Different standards, different rules, different everything depending on which son you were talking about. I learned pretty early that I couldn't rely on them for support. Everything I got, I had to earn or fight for myself. Fast forward to when I was 25. I'd been working at this tech startup for about a year and a half. Not a huge company, maybe 30 employees, but it was growing and I was learning a lot. The pay was decent, benefits were okay, and I was building experience in my field. Then the funding dried up. Investors pulled out. Company couldn't make payroll, and we all got laid off with about 2 weeks' notice. Not ideal, but these things happen. The job market was decent at the time, so I wasn't panicking. Started applying places immediately, had my resume updated, began networking. The plan was to find something within a month or two, bridge the gap with savings, and move forward. Then I started feeling off, constantly thirsty, tired all the time, losing weight without trying, having to use the bathroom every hour. Classic diabetes symptoms, but I didn't recognize them at first. Thought maybe it was stress from the job loss. After 2 weeks of feeling progressively worse, I went to an urgent care clinic. They ran some tests, my blood sugar levels were through the roof, and the doctor looked at me with that expression medical professionals get when they're about to deliver bad news. "You have type 2 diabetes," he said. "Your A1C is 11.2. That's dangerously high. We need to get you on medication immediately." He wrote prescriptions for 2 different medications plus testing supplies. Told me I needed to check my blood sugar multiple times daily, follow a strict diet, and come back in 3 months for follow-up. Then he handed me the prescriptions and wished me luck. I took the scripts to the pharmacy, figuring they'd be expensive but manageable. The pharmacist ran them through my insurance, the COBRA coverage from my old job that I'd signed up for, and came back with a total that made my stomach drop. "That'll be $847 for the month's supply of everything," she said cheerfully. $847 for 1 month. My unemployment benefits were $380 weekly. Even with budgeting, I was looking at maybe $1,600 monthly income. Rent alone was $850. This medication would take more than half of what I had left after housing. I asked about generic versions, discount programs, anything to bring the cost down. She tried a few things, got it down to $780. Still completely unsustainable. I told her I'd have to figure something out and left without the medications. That night, I spent hours researching options. Patient assistance programs that would take months to process. Discount cards that only worked at specific pharmacies. Canadian pharmacies that might be legit but also might not be. Nothing was going to solve my immediate problem of needing medication now and not being able to afford it. I had about $3,000 in savings. That was supposed to be my emergency fund for exactly this kind of situation. But if I spent it all on medication, I'd have nothing for rent, food, or the unexpected expenses that always pop up. I was looking at choosing between my health and having a place to live, so I did what any reasonable person would do when facing a genuine medical emergency with no good options. I called my parents, not asking for a handout, not expecting them to cover everything forever, just looking for temporary help while I got back on my feet. I explained the whole situation, the layoff, the diagnosis, the medication costs, how I had job interviews lined up but needed a bridge for maybe 3 to 4 months until I got hired somewhere with better insurance. I laid out actual numbers. If they could cover maybe $600 monthly for 3 months, that would give me enough breathing room to make everything else work. Dad's response came after about 5 seconds of silence. "You're 25 years old," he said, voice flat. "You need to figure some things out on your own. Don't rely on us just because we're your family." Mom was on speakerphone, and she jumped in with her addition. "We've already raised you. You're an adult now. This is your responsibility to handle." I sat there stunned, phone pressed to my ear, trying to process what I was hearing. This was a medical emergency. I wasn't asking them to fund a vacation or buy me a car. I needed medication to not go into diabetic shock. And they were lecturing me about personal responsibility. "So you're saying you won't help at all?" I asked, just to be crystal clear. "We're saying you need to learn to manage your own problems," Dad replied. "We can't bail you out every time life gets difficult." Every time? I'd never asked them for major help before in my adult life. This was literally the first time I'd requested anything significant since moving out. "I have diabetes," I said slowly, trying to make them understand. "Without medication, I could end up in the hospital or worse. This isn't me being irresponsible or lazy. This is a genuine medical crisis." "Then you'll figure out what you need to do," Dad said. "We didn't raise you to come running to us whenever things get tough." Mom added her final gem. "Maybe this is what you need to learn: independence. We've spent too many years enabling you." Enabling me? By not helping me with anything? The logic was non-existent, but I was past the point of arguing. "Got it," I said. "Thanks for nothing." I hung up. That was September 2017. Last time we spoke until 6 weeks ago. Here's what happened in those 6 years. I figured it out on my own, just like they told me to. Sold my car and bought something cheaper, freeing up $200 monthly. Moved to a smaller apartment with a roommate I found through work, cutting rent in half. Applied to every patient assistance program that existed. Filled out mountains of paperwork. Waited through their processing times. Started buying medication from Canadian pharmacies at a quarter of the US price. Found websites that connected Americans with legitimate Canadian pharmacies that would ship across the border. Was it legal? Gray area. Did I care? Not even slightly. I was choosing between following pharmaceutical industry pricing schemes or staying alive. Pretty easy decision when you frame it that way. The first few months were rough. Managing diabetes while dealing with the stress of unemployment and family rejection was like juggling chainsaws while walking a tightrope. Blood sugar all over the place from the stress. Constantly worried about money, wondering if I'd made the right choices. But I handled it, found creative solutions, cut every possible expense, made it work through sheer determination. I landed a new job after 3 months of searching. The insurance was better, brought my medication costs down to manageable levels. I threw myself into work, proved myself valuable, and got promoted within a year. Then again, 2 years after that. Built a reputation as someone reliable who delivered results. Met my now wife Natalie at a friend's barbecue when I was 27. She was smart, funny, had her life together, and didn't come with any family drama attached. We clicked immediately. Started dating, moved in together after a year, got engaged 6 months after that, bought a house when I was 28. Nothing fancy, but it was ours. 3 bedrooms, decent neighborhood, good schools nearby for the kids we were planning to have eventually. Got married at 29 in a small ceremony with Natalie's family and our close friends. My parents weren't invited. They didn't even know it happened until someone probably told them months later. Built an actual life. The kind of stable, successful life my parents always said they wanted for me. Just did it completely without their input or support. My parents? Didn't hear from them once. No calls, no texts, no attempts at reconciliation. They clearly meant what they said about me handling my own problems. Fine by me. Then 6 weeks ago, I got a text from a number I didn't recognize. Opened it to find a message from my mom. We need to talk. It's urgent. I stared at that text for a solid minute, sitting there on my couch with Natalie beside me watching a movie. 6 years of complete silence and now something suddenly urgent? My first instinct was to delete it and move on with my life. I didn't respond. She texted again 2 hours later. This is about your nephews. Please call. That got my attention. Wyatt had 2 kids. I knew that much from the occasional Facebook stalking I'd done over the years. Boys, ages 8 and 6 now. I'd never met them. Didn't even know their names until I looked at the Facebook photos Mom had posted over the years that I'd never bothered to engage with. They looked like normal kids, smiling in photos, playing at parks, the usual family stuff. I called, curiosity overcoming better judgment. Part of me wondered if something had happened to Wyatt. Part of me wondered if the kids were in danger. The responsible part of my brain kicked in despite my better judgment. Finally, Mom said when she answered. Not even a hello first. We've been trying to reach you for days. You sent one text, 2 hours ago. 2. Well, this is serious. We need to talk about Wyatt's children. Can you come over? We should discuss this in person. I'm not driving to your house. Whatever you need to say it now. She sighed, like I was the one being difficult here. Fine. It's about the boys, your nephews. They've been living with us for the past 2 months. Okay? And we need help. We're not young anymore. Raising 2 children at our age is exhausting. Where's Wyatt? Another sigh. That's complicated. Uncomplicate it. She launched into the whole story then. Wyatt's wife Jennifer had died in a car accident 8 months ago. Some guy ran a red light, T-boned her car, she died at the scene. Tragic, horrible. The kind of thing nobody should have to go through. Wyatt had apparently been struggling to cope ever since. Started drinking heavily, according to Mom, though she said it in that tone that suggested she was downplaying the severity. Knowing Wyatt's history with substances, he'd had problems in his 20s that my parents had always excused. I suspected drinking heavily meant something pretty severe. Then 2 months ago, Wyatt sent my parents an email. Not a phone call. Not an in-person conversation. An email. Said he needed time to figure things out. That he couldn't handle being a parent right now. That the boys were better off with their grandparents while he got his head together. And then he just disappeared. Stopped responding to calls and texts. My parents had no idea where he was. Could be staying with friends, could be in a motel somewhere, could be halfway across the country for all they knew. He'd essentially abandoned his kids via electronic communication and vanished. Classy move, Wyatt. Really stepping up to the plate there. So what's the plan? I asked Mom. Is he coming back? Is this temporary or permanent? We don't know, she admitted. He's not responding to us. His phone goes straight to voicemail. We've had the boys for 2 months now and we're drowning. That sounds difficult. What do you want from me? We need you to help financially, she said, getting to the point. These boys need things. Food, clothes, school supplies, activities. We're looking at about $1,500 monthly for their expenses. Plus, we're having to look into therapy for them because they're obviously traumatized. I actually laughed. Couldn't help it. The situation was so absurd that laughter was the only appropriate response. You want me to send you $1,500 a month? These are your nephews. Your family. Family takes care of family. I actually laughed. Couldn't help it. You want me to send you $1,500 a month? These are your nephews. Family takes care of family. The irony was so thick I could have cut it with a knife. That's interesting, I said. Because 6 years ago, when I needed help with $800 monthly for medication, you told me to figure it out on my own. Said you wouldn't bail me out every time life gets difficult. Silence on the other end. That was different, Mom finally said. How? Explain to me how it was different. You were an adult who needed to learn responsibility. These are children. So when I was between jobs with a medical emergency, that was a teaching moment. But when Wyatt abandons his kids, that's when family steps up. This isn't about keeping score. Dad's voice came through. Apparently, I was on speaker. These boys need help. Then help them. You're retired with money in the bank. You told me you couldn't help with $600 monthly when I was literally sick. Now you're asking for $1,500 for kids that aren't even my responsibility? We're on a fixed income, Mom said. We can't afford to raise 2 children. So figure it out on your own. Don't rely on me just because we're family. I used their exact words back at them. The silence that followed was beautiful. That's different, and you know it, Dad said, voice tight. How? Please explain how this is different from what you told me 6 years ago. Because we actually helped you when you were growing up, Mom snapped. We raised you, fed you, put a roof over your head for 18 years. You owe us. I owe you? For doing the literal bare minimum that parents are legally required to do? You chose to have kids. That's not some debt I need to repay. We're not asking you to raise them, Dad said. Just help financially while we figure out a long-term solution. And what happens when there's no long-term solution? What happens when Wyatt doesn't come back and these kids need to be raised for the next 10 years? You think I'm going to keep sending checks? Your brother is going through something difficult, Mom said. He'll get himself together. Maybe this is what he needs to learn independence, I said, throwing her words from 6 years ago right back at her. Maybe you've spent too many years enabling him. Don't be cruel, she said. I'm not being cruel. I'm being exactly as supportive as you taught me to be. Remember? You can't bail people out every time life gets difficult. This is completely different, Dad said. These are innocent children. Then be their grandparents. Use your comfortable retirement savings that you couldn't spare $600 from 6 years ago. You'll figure it out. We need your help, Mom said, and I could hear the desperation creeping into her voice. No, you need my money. There's a difference. You don't actually want me involved in these kids' lives. You just want me to fund their existence while you two maintain your lifestyle. That's not fair, she protested. You're right. It's not fair. Just like it wasn't fair when you told your diabetic son to figure it out alone while you went on a cruise. But here we are. We didn't go on a cruise right after that, Dad said. 3 months later. Close enough. The point is, you had money for vacations, but not for medication. Now you have money for your retirement, but not for your grandkids. Funny pattern. If you won't help, just say so, Mom said coldly. I won't help. There. I said it. Then you're exactly as selfish as we thought. Good. I learned from the best. I hung up before they could respond. Natalie had been listening to the whole conversation. She walked over and hugged me, and I realized my hands were shaking. You okay? She asked. Yeah, just didn't expect that to feel so satisfying. She laughed. You gave them back everything they gave you. 6 years, I said. 6 years of nothing. And they show up asking for money like we're suddenly family again. The next week, they tried a different approach. Mom called and left a voicemail that was clearly rehearsed. Her voice was breaking in all the right places. Emotional but calculated, hitting every manipulation beat perfectly. Sweetie, it's Mom. I've been thinking a lot about our conversation, about what happened 6 years ago. And you're right. We should have helped you. We should have been there when you were sick. I don't know what we were thinking. Maybe we were scared. Maybe we didn't understand how serious it was. But we failed you. And I'm sorry for that. Pause for dramatic effect. Sniffle. I know I can't take back what happened. I know we hurt you. But this is a chance for us to move forward as a family, to do the right thing together. These boys need us. They need all of us. Please call me back so we can talk about this properly. I love you. I played that voicemail for Natalie. She looked at me with raised eyebrows. That's possibly the most manipulative thing I've ever heard, she said. She's not even apologizing for what they did. She's apologizing for your feelings about it. Sorry we failed you, I said. Not sorry for telling me to handle my medical emergency alone. Not sorry for going on a cruise 3 months later. Just sorry that I felt bad about it. And immediately followed by asking for money again? Classic non-apology. I'm sorry, but here's why you should do what I want anyway. I didn't call back. The message had been carefully crafted to hit emotional buttons while avoiding actual accountability. If she genuinely wanted to apologize, she would have done it without immediately pivoting back to their demands. 3 days later, they showed up at my house. Just appeared on my doorstep Saturday morning like they had any right to be there. Natalie answered the door while I was in the shower, came upstairs looking equal parts annoyed and amused. Your parents are here, she said. Should I tell them to leave or do you want to handle this? I'll handle it, I said, getting dressed. This should be interesting. I went downstairs to find them sitting in my living room like they owned the place. Dad was looking around at the furniture, the TV, the framed pictures on the walls, assessing everything, calculating what my life was worth. Mom was perched on the edge of the couch, clutching her purse like she was afraid something might jump out at her. "Nice place," Dad said when he saw me. "Doing well for yourself. Must be nice having all this while your nephews struggle." "Right. Starting with guilt trips immediately. Classic move." "What do you want?" I asked, not bothering to sit down. "We want to talk," Mom said. "Have an actual conversation instead of fighting over the phone. We drove an hour to get here. The least you can do is hear us out. There's nothing to talk about. I'm not giving you money. You could have saved the trip. We're not just asking for money," Dad said, leaning forward. "We're asking you to step up for family. These boys are your nephews, whether you acknowledge them or not. They've lost their mother. Their father abandoned them. They need stability and support. And I'm your son, whether you acknowledge it or not. Didn't seem to matter 6 years ago when I needed stability and support." Mom's expression hardened. "You're really going to hold that over us forever? We made one mistake and you're going to punish us for the rest of our lives? One mistake? You told your diabetic son to figure out his medical crisis alone. That wasn't a mistake. That was a choice. You chose your comfort over my health." "We made a mistake," she repeated, like saying it again would change reality. "We admit that, but you can't seriously compare helping with medication to raising two traumatized children. The situations aren't even remotely similar." "You're right. One situation involved $600 monthly for 3 months, $1,800 total. The other involves $1,500 monthly for years, potentially. Tens of thousands of dollars. Maybe more. The expensive one you want help with. The cheap one you couldn't be bothered." "Money isn't the point," Dad said, voice rising slightly. "Money is exactly the point. You have enough to raise these kids. You just don't want to spend your retirement savings on them. You want me to fund it so you can keep your lifestyle intact. The cruises, the comfortable retirement, all of it." "That's not true," Mom protested, but her voice lacked conviction. "Then use your own money. You're not broke. You're comfortable. You have savings, pensions, paid off assets. Prove me wrong." They couldn't. We all knew they had the resources. They just didn't want to use them. The silence stretched out, heavy and uncomfortable. "What about the boys?" Mom finally asked. "Don't you care what happens to them? They're innocent in all of this. They didn't ask for any of this to happen. I care that they're in a bad situation. I don't think that situation is my responsibility to fix financially. Wyatt abandoned them. That's on him. You're their grandparents who spent years enabling his behavior. That's on you. I'm their uncle they've never met because you cut me out of your lives. That's not on me." "Family is family," Dad said, pulling out what he probably thought was his trump card. "You're right. And when your family member had a medical emergency, you told him to handle it alone. Told him he needed to learn responsibility. Told him you wouldn't bail him out just because life got difficult. When your other family member spent his entire adult life making bad decisions, you enabled every single one, gave him money whenever he asked, made excuses for his failures. And now you're shocked that he turned out to be someone who abandons his kids via email. We did the best we could with both of you," Mom said. "No, you did the best for Wyatt and told me to figure it out. Different standards, different rules. Same pattern my whole life. We went back and forth like this for another 20 minutes. Every angle they tried, I shut down. Every guilt trip, I redirected with their own logic from 6 years ago. Every attempt to paint me as the bad guy got flipped back onto them. Dad tried the practical approach. These boys will remember who was there for them and who wasn't. You're building resentment that will last forever. Like the resentment I built when you told me to figure out my medical crisis alone? That kind of lasting resentment? Mom tried the emotional manipulation. We're getting older. We won't be around forever. You'll regret this when we're gone. You know what I'll actually regret? Not standing up for myself 6 years ago. Not calling you out on your selective support. Not recognizing sooner that you only consider me family when you need something." Dad stood up, clearly frustrated. "This conversation is going nowhere. You've made your decision. You're choosing to abandon these children. I'm choosing not to enable Wyatt's irresponsibility with my money. Same way you chose not to enable my medical needs with yours. Full circle." Eventually, they realized they weren't getting anywhere and left. Mom stood up, gathered her purse, looked around my house one more time, like she was cataloging everything she could use against me later. As they walked to the door, she turned around one final time. "You've changed," she said, voice cold. "You used to be such a sweet boy. So kind and caring. I don't even recognize you anymore." "Yeah, well, life changes people. Especially when your parents tell you to figure out life-threatening medical issues on your own. Turns out that kind of abandonment really builds character. We didn't abandon you. You told your diabetic son with no insurance that you wouldn't help with medication costs because he needed to learn responsibility. What would you call that? She didn't have an answer. They left, and I watched them drive away from my window. Natalie came and stood beside me. That was intense, she said. That was necessary. They needed to understand that I'm not going to fold just because they show up and demand things. Do you think they'll keep trying? Probably. People like them don't accept no easily. They're used to getting what they want through guilt and manipulation. I was right. That was 2 weeks ago. Since then, I've gotten texts from extended family members I barely know. Aunts and uncles who haven't spoken to me in years suddenly have very strong opinions about my obligations. Cousins I met maybe twice at childhood birthday parties are lecturing me about family values. The messages follow predictable patterns. Those poor boys need help. How can you be so heartless? Your parents raised you, and this is how you repay them. Family takes care of family. Nobody asks why my parents with a comfortable retirement and paid-off house need financial help from their son. Nobody questions why Wyatt abandoned his children or where he disappeared to. Nobody wonders why I went 6 years without contact with my family or what might have caused that. Just blanket assumption that I'm the bad guy. One aunt sent me a multi-paragraph text about how blood is thicker than water and how I should be the bigger person. I didn't respond. Another uncle called me directly, left a voicemail about how disappointed my grandparents would be if they were still alive to see me turn my back on family. That one almost made me laugh. My grandparents always liked Wyatt better too. Pattern recognition isn't that hard. The most aggressive messages came from my mom's sister. 5 texts in one day, each one more guilt-trippy than the last. Started with gentle persuasion. At Christmas dinner, my 9-year-old son got a plate of cold leftovers while everyone ate hot food. They said he should be grateful. He whispered, "Dad, do the thing you promised." 5 minutes later, my mother-in-law's face went white, and the table erupted in chaos. Hey, Reddit. My mother-in-law served my kid cold leftovers at Christmas dinner, while everyone else got a hot meal. Told him to be grateful for scraps. So I kept the promise I made to my son and walked out. She thought family loyalty would keep me in line. A divorce lawyer disagreed. So I'm Jake, 34, been running an auto repair shop in Pine Ridge, Wisconsin for the past 12 years. Started from nothing, built it up myself, work 70-hour weeks sometimes. The kind of job where your hands are permanently stained with grease and you smell like motor oil even after 3 showers. Not glamorous, but it pays the bills and keeps a roof over my family's head. When I started the shop at 22, I was a kid with more ambition than sense. Took out a business loan, worked 16-hour days, learned everything myself because I couldn't afford help. First year, I made less than minimum wage, but I was building something mine. By year 5, I'd paid off the loan and the shop was turning real profit. Now I've got 4 mechanics, steady contracts, and a reputation for quality work. We're doing okay. Better than okay. Been married to Lauren for 12 years. Met her at a summer festival when I was 22, and stupid enough to think love conquered all. She was visiting from Madison, staying with her aunt for the summer, and I thought she was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. Dark hair, bright smile, laughed at my terrible jokes. We spent that whole summer together. By September, I was sure I'd found my person. We got married that December because when you're young and in love, waiting seems pointless. Looking back now, I can see all the signs I missed. The way she'd get quiet when I talked about the shop. The way she'd change the subject when I mentioned plans for the future. The way she never quite defended me when her family made their comments. But when you're 22 and convinced you found your soulmate, you don't see red flags. You see challenges you'll overcome together. The real problem started about a week after the wedding when I got to know Patricia properly. Patricia Bennett was a professional at making you feel small while pretending to care. Every insult came wrapped in concern. Every criticism disguised as helpful advice. She'd perfected this skill over decades, and she wielded it like a surgeon with a scalpel. Precise, deliberate, designed to cut deep without leaving visible scars. She'd worked as a regional manager for some insurance company for 30 years. Retired at 55, with a solid pension and enough money to live comfortably in that big house on Maple Street. The kind of house with a formal dining room nobody actually uses, and white carpets that make you nervous just looking at them. Her second husband, Todd, was a consultant who traveled for work constantly. Nice enough guy on his own, but he'd learned early to just agree with Patricia and stay out of her way. Lauren's biological father had left when she was 12. Classic midlife crisis story. Ran off with someone from his office, moved to Florida, barely stayed in touch. Patricia had raised Lauren and her brother Kyle, mostly alone while building her career, and she never let anyone forget it. Every conversation eventually circled back to her sacrifices, the long hours she'd worked, the opportunities she'd given up, how she'd single-handedly raised two successful kids with no help from anyone. I respected that initially. Single mother making it work while climbing the corporate ladder? That takes real strength. But over time, I realized Patricia didn't want respect. She wanted control. She'd paid her dues raising kids alone, and now everyone in her orbit owed her eternal gratitude and complete compliance. First time she came to visit our apartment, maybe 4 days after the wedding, I knew we were in trouble. She walked through our little two-bedroom place like a health inspector at a failing restaurant, touched our secondhand couch with just her fingertips, looked at our thrift store coffee table with this expression like she smelled something bad, checked the kitchen with pursed lips, stood in the bathroom doorway without actually going in. Finally, she sat down on that couch with visible reluctance and delivered the line that would set the tone for the next 12 years. Well, it's cozy. You'll want something bigger once you get a real career going, Jake. I laughed it off, made some joke about how we were just starting out. Lauren squeezed my hand hard under the table, her signal for drop it. I dropped it. But Patricia wasn't done. She mentioned the neighborhood wasn't great, said the building looked like it had maintenance issues, wondered out loud how we could possibly plan for a family in such a small space. Each comment delivered with that same concerned smile, that same tone that made you question if she was insulting you or just being practical. The comments never stopped. They just multiplied and evolved. When I told her about my plan to open the repair shop, she said, "How ambitious. Though the failure rate for small businesses is quite high. I hope you're prepared for that reality." When I signed the lease on the shop space, she said, "Renting. Probably wise for now." When I paid off the business loan 2 years early after busting my rear working 80-hour weeks, she said, "It's nice that you're self-employed. No corporate ladder to worry about climbing." When we bought our first house, Patricia walked through making actual notes on a pad. "The bones are good. You'll want to gut the kitchen eventually. But yes, I suppose it's a start for you too." A start. Everything I accomplished was just a preliminary step towards something that might actually matter someday. The worst was when Danny was born. I was in the hospital room holding my 3-hour-old son, crying because I'd never felt anything that powerful in my life. And Patricia looked at this perfect tiny human and said, "He's lovely. I do hope he has Lauren's drive and ambition. Boys really need that to succeed in this world." She looked at my newborn son and decided he'd probably turn out like me, which in Patricia's world meant he was already starting behind. Every family dinner, every holiday, every visit was another opportunity for these little cuts. Never anything big enough to call out directly. Never anything I could point to and say, "That was cruel," without sounding oversensitive. Just a constant drip of criticism disguised as concern. And Lauren's response was always the same. "That's just how she is. She doesn't mean anything by it. She's from a different generation. She's just trying to help. You're being too sensitive." But here's what I started to notice over the years. Patricia saved her sharpest comments for when Lauren wasn't in the room. Or she'd say things right in front of Lauren, but in that tone that made it sound like friendly advice instead of an insult. And Lauren would either miss it entirely or pretend she missed it. Either way, she never once stood up for me. Not once in 12 years. You know what the worst part was? I started to believe it. Not consciously. But somewhere deep down, Patricia's constant criticism started to take root. I'd look at the shop and think maybe it wasn't that impressive. Look at our house and see all the things that weren't updated instead of being proud we owned it. Look at my work-stained hands and wonder if Lauren regretted marrying a mechanic instead of some corporate guy in a suit. And Danny. God, Danny got the worst of it. Our son is 9 now. Small for his age, incredibly bright, loves to read and build things and ask questions about how everything works. Reminds me of myself at that age. Curious about the world. Eager to learn. The kind of kid teachers love because he actually cares about understanding things. But Patricia treated him exactly like she treated me. Every achievement came with a qualifier. Every accomplishment got diminished. When he won his school spelling bee in 3rd grade after studying those words for weeks, Patricia's response was, "Well, I imagine the competition wasn't very difficult at a school this size. Still, good job, I suppose." When his art teacher displayed his clay sculpture in the hallway because she thought it was genuinely impressive, Patricia said, "That's nice, dear. Though you really should focus more on activities that will help with college applications. Art is more of a hobby." The kid was 8 years old, and she was talking about college applications. When he got Student of the Month for September, Patricia said, "How many students are in your class?" "Oh, 22. So really it's just a matter of time before everyone gets it." Every single thing he did got dismissed as either easy, lucky, or not really that impressive. And I watched it do to him what it had done to me. Watched this bright, confident kid start to doubt himself, start to apologize for being excited about things, start to assume nothing he did would ever quite be good enough. Lauren saw it happening, had to have seen it, but every time I brought it up, she'd defend her mother. She's just trying to help him set realistic expectations. She wants him to be prepared for how competitive the world is. You're being too sensitive on his behalf. Danny's fine. But Danny wasn't fine. I could see it in his eyes. The way he'd light up about something and then immediately dampen that excitement. The way he'd show me a drawing he was proud of and then say, "But it's not that good," before I could even respond. The way he'd flinch slightly when Patricia started talking, bracing for whatever criticism was coming. And I kept my mouth shut, kept the peace. Told myself it wasn't that bad, that Danny would toughen up, that eventually Patricia would ease off, until 3 months ago when everything changed. We were in the garage together on a Saturday. I was doing an oil change on Mrs. Thompson's Accord, and Danny was handing me tools, asking his usual questions about how engines work. Good kid stuff, father-son bonding, the kind of afternoon I lived for. He got quiet after a while. Then he asked the question that broke my heart. "Dad, why doesn't Grandma Patricia like me?" I put down the wrench and looked at my kid. 9 years old, grease smudge on his cheek, holding a socket wrench and trying not to cry. "She likes you, buddy." "No, she doesn't. She always says stuff that makes me feel bad. Like when I showed her my science project, and she said it was fine, but I should have done more research. Or when I made her that card for her birthday, and she said my handwriting looked messy. Or when I got the Student of the Month award, and she said everyone gets it eventually." He'd been keeping track, cataloging every criticism, carrying them around like weights in his pockets. "Sometimes people show they care in weird ways," I said, knowing it was a weak answer, even as the words left my mouth. "But it doesn't feel like she cares. It feels like she thinks I'm not good enough." And there it was. The thing I'd been avoiding seeing for 9 years. My son felt exactly the way I'd felt for 12 years. Not good enough. Never good enough. Constantly failing to meet standards that shifted just out of reach every time you got close. I pulled him into a hug right there in the garage, getting motor oil all over both of us. "Listen to me. You are good enough. You're smart and kind and curious and creative. Some people in this world won't see that, and that's their problem, not yours. But she's family. Isn't family supposed to see the good stuff?" Man, the wisdom of kids asking the questions adults are too afraid to face. "Yeah, they're supposed to." Danny pulled back and looked at me with these serious eyes that no 9-year-old should have. "Will you stand up for me if she does it again? Really stand up for me? Not just tell her to be nice?" That's when I made the promise. The promise that would end my marriage and start the hardest 6 months of my life. "If she ever hurts you again, really hurts you, I'll do whatever it takes to protect you, even if it makes people mad, even if it causes problems. You're my son, and nobody gets to make you feel small. Nobody. Deal?" Deal. We shook on it like two men making a business agreement. His hand was small in mine, still had that kid softness, but his grip was firm. He believed me, trusted me to keep that promise. I thought maybe Patricia would ease up. Maybe I'd never have to actually follow through. Maybe things would get better on their own. 3 months later, Christmas dinner proved me wrong in the worst possible way. Patricia had insisted on hosting Christmas at her place like she did every year. Big house, formal dining room, the whole production. Lauren's brother Kyle was there with his wife and their 2 kids. Todd was there doing his usual fade-into-the-background routine. And of course, Patricia was in full hostess mode, running the show like a general commanding troops. The day had been tense from the start. Patricia made comments about the gifts we brought being nice, but not quite what she would have chosen. Pointed out that Danny's hair needed a trim. Mentioned I looked like I'd gained weight. Just her usual routine of small cuts disguised as observations. But dinner was when it all fell apart. Everyone gathered in that formal dining room with the fancy china that probably cost more than my truck. Patricia brought out food family style, making a big production of serving each person. Turkey, ham, mashed potatoes, 3 kinds of vegetables, rolls, the whole traditional Christmas spread. She served each person individually, asking about portions, making sure everyone got exactly what they wanted. Then she got to Danny. She went to the kitchen and came back with a plate, set it in front of him with this smile, and my stomach dropped. The plate was from the refrigerator. Cold turkey, cold mashed potatoes that had that dried out look, cold green beans, leftovers from something she'd made days ago, still in that crusty state that only happens when food sits in the fridge too long. Everyone at the table went silent, all eyes on that plate, then quickly looked away, pretending they hadn't noticed. There you go, sweetie, Patricia said, still smiling. I know you're a picky eater, so I saved you some simple food. Nothing too overwhelming. Danny stared at his plate, then looked at everyone else's plates piled high with hot, fresh food. Then back at his own cold plate. His face went red. His hands started to shake slightly. Grandma, can I have hot food like everyone else? This is perfectly good food, Danny. Some children don't get any Christmas dinner at all. You should be grateful for what you have. The table stayed silent. Nobody said a word. Kyle looked uncomfortable but didn't speak up. Todd studied his own plate intensely. Lauren opened her mouth but closed it again without saying anything. And Danny, my 9-year-old son, looked at that cold plate and understood exactly what was happening. His grandmother had deliberately served him inferior food to teach him some lesson about being grateful, or knowing his place, or whatever twisted logic she'd used to justify it, in front of the whole family. On Christmas. He turned to me, tugged my sleeve, leaned close and whispered so only I could hear. Dad, can you do the thing you promised if they hurt me again? I looked at my kid, looked at that cold plate of leftovers, looked at Patricia sitting there with that satisfied expression, looked at Lauren who was staring at her own plate, refusing to meet my eyes, looked at Kyle and Todd and everyone else at that table who was going to pretend this was normal and fine and not incredibly messed up. And I thought about that promise in the garage 3 months ago. So I stood up. Get your coat, Danny. We're leaving. The table exploded. Patricia's face went from satisfied to shocked to outraged in about 2 seconds. Excuse me? I said we're leaving. Danny, go get your coat from the front closet. Jake, sit down. Lauren hissed across the table. You're making a scene. No, I'm keeping a promise to my son. Come on, buddy. Danny didn't need to be told twice. He pushed back from the table and headed for the front door, like the house was on fire. Patricia found her voice. How dare you? I spent all day preparing this dinner and you're going to storm out like a child over nothing. Over nothing? I turned to face her directly. You served my 9-year-old son cold leftovers from the refrigerator while everyone else got a hot meal. You did it deliberately. You wanted to teach him some lesson about being grateful by making him feel less than everyone else at this table. He's a picky eater. I was being considerate. That's a lie and you know it. He eats everything I make at home. He's not picky. You did this to hurt him, and you did it in front of everyone so he'd feel humiliated. Kyle jumped up. You don't talk to our mother like that. Your mother just emotionally abused my son at Christmas dinner. So yeah, I'm going to talk to her like that. Boys don't need to be coddled, Patricia said, her voice cold now. He needs to learn that the world doesn't revolve around him. He's 9 years old. My voice rose for the first time. He's a kid, and you're supposed to be his grandmother. You're supposed to love him and support him, not tear him down at every opportunity. Lauren stood up. Jake, please. Let's just sit down and finish dinner. We can talk about this later. There's nothing to talk about. Your mother served your son cold food to humiliate him, and you sat there and let it happen, just like you always do, just like you've let her do to both of us for 12 years. Don't you dare blame me for your oversensitivity. Oversensitivity? Lauren, open your eyes. Look at that plate. Look at what your mother did and tell me that's normal. Tell me that's loving. Tell me that's okay. She couldn't. She just stood there with tears starting to form, mouth opening and closing, unable to form words that would make this anything other than what it was. Todd spoke up for the first time. Maybe everyone should just calm down and... No, I cut him off. We're not calming down. We're not pretending this is fine. We're not sitting back down like nothing happened. We're leaving. If you walk out that door, Patricia said, her voice like ice, don't expect to be welcomed back. I looked at her. This woman who'd spent 12 years making me feel worthless. Who'd started doing the same thing to my son. Who'd just served a child cold leftovers on Christmas to prove some twisted point about hierarchy and gratitude. Good. I wouldn't want to come back to a place where my son gets treated like garbage. Danny was waiting by the front door with his coat already on, eyes wide, watching this all unfold. Let's go, buddy. We walked out into the December cold, got in my truck, pulled out of that driveway with my phone already starting to buzz with incoming calls and texts. Are you mad at me? Danny asked quietly. I pulled over into a gas station parking lot, shifted into park, and turned to face him. Listen to me very carefully. I am not mad at you. I'm mad at them. What Grandma Patricia did tonight was wrong. She tried to make you feel small and worthless, and I will never let anyone do that to you. Not her, not anyone. You deserve better than that. You understand? He nodded, and I watched his whole body relax. Like he'd been holding his breath since we left. Where are we going? Somewhere that treats you like the amazing kid you are. We ended up at Betty's Diner on Highway 12, one of those old school places with vinyl booths and a waitress who calls everyone hon. They were open on Christmas, serving turkey dinner for people who didn't have anywhere else to go. We sat in a booth in the back, ordered 2 specials, and had the best Christmas dinner of my life. Danny told me about the book he was reading, some fantasy thing with dragons and magic. I told him about a '67 Camaro I had in the shop that needed a complete engine rebuild. We talked about school and his friends and this kid in his class who was bullying people and how Danny had stood up to him. Normal dad and son conversation. The kind we should have been having all day instead of walking on eggshells around Patricia's toxic behavior. The food was good. The company was better. And for the first time in years, I felt like I'd done exactly the right thing. We got home around 9. Lauren's car was already in the driveway, and I knew what was coming. She was waiting in the living room, still in her Christmas dress, eyes red, expression hard. Soon as we walked in, she told Danny to go to his room without even looking at him. Danny glanced at me. I nodded. It's okay, buddy. Head upstairs. He went, but I knew he'd be sitting at the top of the stairs listening to every word. That's what I would have done at his age. Lauren waited until she heard his bedroom door close. How could you humiliate my family like that? I didn't humiliate anyone. Your mother did that herself. That's your version. That's what happened. She served Danny cold leftovers while everyone else got a hot meal. She did it deliberately to hurt him. She was trying to teach him a lesson about being grateful. He's 9 years old, Lauren. He doesn't need lessons about gratitude delivered through humiliation. He needs to know his family loves him and values him. Your mother did the exact opposite. I was trying to keep the peace. At the cost of our son's dignity, at the cost of his self-worth, how many times are you going to sacrifice him to make your mother happy? Her face flushed. Don't you turn this around on me. You're the one who caused a scene. You're the one who insulted my mother in her own home. You're the one who dragged Danny out of there to prove some point. Someone had to protect him since you clearly weren't going to. The words landed like a slap. Lauren's face went pale, then red again with anger. How dare you question my love for my son? I'm not questioning your love. I'm questioning your judgment, your priorities. Every single time there's a conflict between your mother and your family, you choose her. Every single time. That is not true. So I laid it all out. Every incident over the past 9 years. Every time Patricia had torn Danny down and Lauren had defended it as constructive criticism. The spelling bee that wasn't impressive because the school was small. The art project that was nice but not practical. The Student of the Month award that everyone gets eventually. The handwriting that needed work. The birthday card that wasn't quite good enough. Every moment that should have been celebrated that got diminished instead. And tonight, I finished. Tonight she served him cold food on Christmas and called it a lesson. And you said nothing. You sat there and let it happen because standing up to your mother is more uncomfortable than watching your son get hurt. Lauren was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was shaking. If you hate my family so much, maybe you should leave. I looked at my wife, searched her face for any sign she didn't mean it, but her expression was set, determined. She'd made her choice, just like she'd made it every time for the past 12 years. Her mother over her husband, her mother over her son, her mother over everything. You want me to leave? I want you to figure out if you can be part of this family without constantly attacking my mother. I defended our son. That's not attacking. It is to her. It is to me. Do you know what she said after you left? She cried, Jake. She actually cried. Said she was trying her best to be a good grandmother, and you made her feel like a monster. I laughed. Bitter sound with zero humor. She's crying because for the first time in 12 years, someone stood up to her. That's not being victimized. That's being held accountable. Get out, Lauren said quietly. Lauren.
My husband wanted my sister to be his wife for a day. His brother wanted me for life. My husband Damien had this way of dropping bombs like he was asking me to pass the salt. We were eating dinner, pasta I'd made after a 12-hour day at the firm because Damien said he was too tired to cook even though he'd been home since 3. I was twirling spaghetti around my fork when he said, "So my 10-year reunion is next month and I need Nikki to come with me." I kept chewing because I assumed I'd misheard him. Nikki was my younger sister, prettier than me by conventional standards, thinner than me by 15 pounds, and unemployed by choice for the last 2 years because she was finding herself on my dime. I paid her rent. I paid her car insurance. I paid for the highlights she got every 6 weeks because she said dark roots made her feel less confident. I didn't realize I was also paying for her to attend my husband's high school reunion too. I swallowed my pasta and said, "Why would Nikki be coming to your reunion?" Damien didn't even look up from his phone. "Because I need her there," he said. Like that explained everything. I set my fork down and waited for him to elaborate because surely there was more to this sentence. There wasn't. He just kept scrolling through whatever app had his attention more than I did. Damien, I said, and he finally looked up with that expression he always wore when I was about to inconvenience him with questions. Why do you need my sister at your high school reunion instead of your actual wife? He sighed like I was being exhausting, like I was the one who'd just said something insane over pasta. Because I told everyone I married her, he said. Back when we first started dating, my buddies met her once at that barbecue and they assumed she was my girlfriend. I never corrected them. I stared at him. I kept staring at him. I was waiting for the part where he laughed and said he was kidding, where this became some weird joke I didn't find funny but could at least categorize as humor. That part never came. You told your friends you married my sister. I repeated slowly, making sure I understood the words coming out of his mouth. It's not a big deal, he said, picking his fork back up like we were done discussing this. It was easier than explaining. And honestly, babe, you know how those guys are. They're shallow. If they remember Nikki being hot and they've spent 10 years thinking I locked that down. I can't show up with someone different and explain that actually I married the other one. The other one. I'd graduated top of my class at law school. I'd made partner at 33. I'd bought us this house, the cars in our driveway, and every piece of furniture Damien was currently sitting on. And I was the other one. I could feel something cold spreading through my chest, but I kept my voice steady because that's what I did. I stayed calm. I was reasonable. I didn't make scenes. So your solution, I said, is to bring my sister as your fake wife to a reunion full of people I'll never meet. And I'm supposed to just be okay with that? Damien reached across the table and grabbed my hand like he was comforting me through my own confusion. It's one night, he said, squeezing my fingers. Nobody will ever know. These people don't matter. I'll make it up to you, I promise. We'll do a nice dinner after, just us. Whatever restaurant you want. He smiled at me with those blue eyes that used to make my stomach flip, and I realized something that should have been obvious years ago. He thought I was stupid. He thought I was so desperate to keep him happy that I'd agree to anything if he just promised me a nice dinner afterward. And the worst part? He was probably right. He'd been training me to accept less since the day we met. I don't know, Damien, I said, and I watched his face change from charm to irritation in half a second. It just feels weird. Why can't you just tell them the truth? He pulled his hand back. Because I've been lying for 10 years, Carissa. What am I supposed to say now? Hey guys, funny story, I actually married her boring older sister who works all the time. That's humiliating. Boring, older, works all the time. Each word landed like a small punch to the chest, but I didn't react because I never reacted. I just absorbed it and kept functioning. That was my role in this marriage. Provider, absorber, the other one. Besides, Damien continued, Nikki already said yes. She's excited about it. She said it sounds fun. I blinked. You already asked her? Before asking me? He shrugged. I needed to make sure she was available first. Logistics. My sister had agreed to pretend to be my husband's wife. My sister, who I'd been financially supporting for 2 years, who called me crying every month about how hard her life was, who I'd given everything to because that's what big sisters did. She'd said yes to this without even calling me first. Damien must have seen something in my face because his expression softened into that fake concern he was so good at. Babe, don't be upset. Nikki said you should be flattered that she's willing to help. She's doing this for us. For you, really. So I can network and maybe finally land something better than that cashier job you're always complaining about. I wasn't complaining about his cashier job. I was complaining about the fact that he'd had 4 cashier jobs in 3 years and quit each one because his managers didn't respect him. I was complaining about funding his life while he figured out what he wanted to be when he grew up at 34 years old. But somehow that had become me being unsupportive. Somehow everything always became my fault. One night, Damien said again, watching me carefully now, seeing just how much more he needed to push. Nobody gets hurt. And then we never talk about it again. Okay. I nodded. I agreed to let Nikki pretend to be Damien's wife for one night at his reunion. I told myself it was harmless, just an embarrassing lie he needed help covering up. But something about how quickly Nikki said yes kept nagging at me. How she already knew the date before I did. How comfortable Damien seemed asking his wife to step aside for her own sister. I decided I wasn't going to sit back and watch from the sidelines. I was going to insert myself right into their little rehearsals and see exactly how they acted when the wife they were replacing was standing in the room. I decided to help them rehearse because I wanted to see their faces when the wife they were pretending didn't exist, walked into the room and offered to participate. I wanted to watch them squirm. I wanted Nikki to look guilty and Damien to stumble over his words, and both of them to realize how insane this whole situation was. So I came home early from work the next day and found them in my living room going over their story, and I said, I figured I could help, give you feedback on what looks believable. They barely looked up. Damien said, sure, babe, and went right back to whatever Nikki was saying. I sat down in the chair across from them and waited for the awkwardness to settle in. It never did. They just kept going like I was part of the furniture in the house I paid for with money I earned while both of them contributed nothing. Okay, so when they ask how we met, Damien said, leaning toward Nikki with his elbows on his knees, I'll say I saw you across the room at a mutual friend's birthday party, and I knew right then I had to talk to you. I felt my whole body go rigid. That was how Damien and I met. I was standing by the window and he walked up and said I looked like I was plotting my escape, and I laughed and we talked for 3 hours, and he asked for my number before I left. Wait, I said, and they both glanced at me like I'd interrupted something important. That's our story. That's how you and I actually met. The night that started our entire relationship. Damien shrugged. Exactly. I already know it by heart, so I won't mess up the details. Makes it easier. You want to use the story of how you met your wife to pretend you married someone else? You don't see anything wrong with that? Not really. It's practical. I turned to Nikki. And you're okay with this? Pretending you had the night that I actually had? The night I've told you about a dozen times because I thought my sister would care about the most important moment of my life? Nikki examined her nails. I mean, it's not like you own a story, Carissa. Things happen to lots of people the same way. It's not that deep. It happened to me. Specifically. With him. Your brother-in-law. And now we're borrowing it for one night. You'll get it back. She said it like I was being stingy with a sweater. Damien turned back to Nikki like the conversation was over. So after the party, I texted you the next day and asked if you wanted to get coffee. And I said yes, but I made you wait 3 days before we actually went, Nikki said, smiling at him like this was a fond memory she actually had. Because I didn't want to seem too eager. That was exactly what I did. I made him wait because my roommate told me 3 days was the minimum for not looking desperate. Nikki knew this story because I told her years ago, late at night, when I thought I was sharing something precious with my little sister. And now she was reciting it back to my husband like it belonged to her. I told you that story in confidence, I said to Nikki, when we were close. When I thought you actually cared about my life. Damien let out a loud sigh and turned to face me fully. You know what this is really about? You're so used to being the boss at work that you can't let anyone else have anything without controlling it. Everything has to go through Carissa. Everything has to be approved by Carissa. We can't even have a conversation without you hovering over it like a manager. This isn't about control. This is about you giving away my memories. See, there you go again. Your memories, your story, your life. He shook his head. Not everything belongs to you just because you were present for it. I was there too. It's my story as much as yours, and I can tell it however I want. Nikki nodded. He has a point. You can't copyright a relationship. I tried a different approach. Okay, well, what about the proposal? What are you going to say when people ask about that? Rooftop restaurant downtown, Damien said without hesitation. I had the ring hidden in my jacket pocket all night, and I was so nervous I could barely eat. Then after dessert, I got down on one knee and the whole restaurant clapped. My engagement, my proposal. The happiest night of my life reduced to a script for my sister to memorize. That's literally what you did for me, I said, and my voice cracked in a way I hated. That's my proposal. I cried. You cried. The waiter brought us free champagne. I called my mom from the restaurant because I couldn't wait to tell her. That memory is mine, Damien. Ours. How can you just hand it to someone else? Damien's face twisted into something ugly. You know what, Carissa? You've always been jealous of Nikki. Ever since you were kids. She got more attention, she got more dates, she got more everything. And you've never gotten over it. He gestured at my sister. This isn't about the reunion. This is about you still competing with her after 30 years. I'm not competing with anyone. I'm asking why my husband is teaching my sister how to be me. Because she's willing to help without making it a federal case. He turned to Nikki with a softened expression. Unlike some people. Nikki reached over and squeezed his arm supportively. It's okay. She doesn't get it. You think this is easy for me? Damien's voice rose suddenly, like he was the one being wronged. I have to go back to these people and lie to their faces all night. I have to pretend my whole life turned out different than it did. But sure, let's focus on how hard this is for you. Let's make it about Carissa's feelings like we always do. I stared at him. You created this situation. You're the one who lied for 10 years. And I'm trying to fix it without blowing up my entire social network. But you can't give me one night. After everything I do around here, you can't give me one single night without making it weird. 1. What exactly do you do around here? The question hung in the air. Damien's jaw tightened, but before he could respond, Nikki jumped in. He supports you emotionally. He's here when you come home from your stressful job. He manages the house while you're working all the time. She said it like she was listing his accomplishments at a job interview. Not everything is about money, Carissa. I looked around at the house I paid for, the furniture I bought, the electricity and water and internet that came out of my account every month. Damien hadn't had a steady job in 3 years. The last time he managed the house, he forgot to pay the water bill and we got a shut-off notice. I already talked to Mom about this, Nikki added casually. She said you'd probably overreact. She thinks it's actually kind of sweet that Damien cared enough about his friend's opinions to keep up the story this long. You talked to our mother about this before I even knew it was happening? I needed advice. She gets it. I don't know why you can't. Damien seized on this immediately. See? Your own mother understands. Your own sister is willing to help. The only person with a problem is you. He paused and tilted his head. What does that tell you? I didn't have an answer. Or I had too many answers and none of them would come out right. Let's just keep practicing, Nikki said, dismissing me entirely. We don't have that much time left. They went back to it like I'd given them permission to continue robbing me in broad daylight. Damien walked Nikki through our first anniversary and the trip we took to the coast, and the time I surprised him at work with lunch. All things that happened to me. All moments I thought belonged to us. At one point, I tried to interject again, to point out that the restaurant on our anniversary was French, not Italian, and Damien cut me off. "Oh, here we go," he said, pitching his voice high in a cruel imitation of mine. "Actually, Damien, that's not exactly right. Actually, Damien, you're telling it wrong. Actually, Damien, let me correct you in front of everyone like I always do." He looked at Nikki and they both laughed at me in my house. "I was just trying to help you get the details right," I said quietly. "We don't need your help," Nikki said, still smiling from the impression. "We've got it handled. Why don't you go do some work or something? Isn't that what you're good at?" I told myself to let it go. This was my husband and my sister. They were just stressed about the reunion. None of it meant anything. I was being sensitive. I went upstairs to change and gave myself 5 minutes to calm down. I washed my face, took deep breaths, told myself I was overreacting just like everyone kept saying. I was halfway down the stairs when I heard Nikki giggle. Not her normal laugh, but something softer. Private. I stopped on the landing and looked through the railing, and what I saw made my whole body go cold. Damien had his hand on Nikki's face. His thumb was tracing her cheekbone, and she was leaning into it with her eyes half closed and their faces were inches apart. They were about to kiss. My husband and my sister in my living room in my house. I must have made a sound because they jumped apart like someone fired a gun. Nikki's face went red and Damien's hands flew up and they both started talking at once. "It's not what it looks like," Damien said. "We were just rehearsing," Nikki said. "In case anyone asks about us being affectionate." I stood on the stairs looking down at them, and they looked back up with matching panic, trying very hard to become innocents. "Right," I said slowly. "Rehearsal." Damien's face relaxed into relief. "Exactly. We got carried away practicing. It didn't mean anything." Nikki nodded quickly. "We have to look like a real couple. That's literally all it was." I walked downstairs and sat back in my chair and watched them watch me, waiting to see what I would do. And I did nothing. I let them think I bought it, because I needed time to figure out what was actually happening before I said something I couldn't take back. But I wasn't overreacting anymore. Something was very wrong and I wasn't going to sleep on it. I wasn't going to give them time to align their stories or practice their excuses. Damien first while the panic was still fresh. Then Nikki, alone, without him there to feed her lines. If neither of them cracked, I'd find someone else in his life who'd seen what I was too blind to notice. Someone who owed him nothing. Someone with no reason to protect him. The truth was coming out tonight one way or another. Nikki left an hour later, and I followed Damien upstairs without saying a word. He went into the bathroom to brush his teeth like nothing had happened. Like I hadn't just watched him almost kiss my sister. Like this was any other regular night in our marriage. I waited until he came out, and then I stepped in front of the bedroom door. "Move," he said. "No." He blinked at me like I'd spoken another language. In 10 years of marriage, I'd never blocked a door. I'd never stood in his way. And I'd never been anything but accommodating and reasonable and easy to walk around. "Carissa, I'm tired. Move. You're not sleeping until you tell me what's going on with you and Nikki." He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "We already explained that. It was rehearsal. You said you understood." I lied. "I don't understand anything. I don't understand why my husband had his hands on my sister's face. I don't understand why she was leaning into him like she'd done it 100 times before. I don't understand why you two looked more comfortable together than you've looked with me in years." Damien tried to step around me and I moved with him. His jaw tightened. "You're being crazy right now. You know that, right? You're acting like a crazy person. Then explain it to me so I stop being crazy. Tell me one thing that makes sense." "I already told you. We were practicing looking like a couple. That's literally all it was." "Then why did you jump apart like I caught you doing something wrong? If it was just practice, you would have laughed it off. You wouldn't have panicked." He threw his hands up. "What do you want me to say? That I'm sleeping with your sister? Is that what you need to hear so you can feel justified in this little meltdown you're having? Are you?" The question hung between us. Damien stared at me and I stared back, and for 3 seconds neither of us breathed. "I can't believe you'd even ask me that." His voice went quiet and wounded like I was the one who'd hurt him. "After all these years together. After everything we've built. You're going to stand there and accuse me of sleeping with Nikki because we got a little too into character during a rehearsal?" You didn't answer the question. "Because the question is insane." He was yelling now and I didn't flinch. "No, Carissa. No, I'm not sleeping with your sister. Happy? Can I go to bed now?" He tried to push past me and I grabbed his arm. My fingers dug into his bicep and he stopped moving and looked down at my hand like he couldn't believe I was touching him without permission. "Let go of me. Not until you look me in the eyes and tell me there's nothing between you two." He yanked his arm free and his whole face changed. His lip curled up on one side and his eyes went flat and cold, and he looked at me like I was something stuck to the bottom of his shoe. "You want to know what there is between us?" "Relief. That's what. Relief that I get to spend time with someone who doesn't interrogate me every time I breathe. Relief that I get to be around a woman who actually makes me feel good instead of making me feel like a failure every single day. I have never called you a failure. You don't have to. It's in everything you do. The way you sigh when you pay the bills. The way you mention your job every 5 minutes. The way you look at me like I'm a problem you're too tired to solve. He stepped closer and his voice dropped. Nikki doesn't look at me like that. Nikki thinks I'm worth something. Nikki doesn't pay your bills. See? There it is. Everything comes back to money with you. You can't even have a conversation without reminding me that you're the one with the checkbook. I'm reminding you that I'm the one with the checkbook because you seem to have forgotten who funds your life while you spend your days rehearsing romance with my sister. Damien's nostrils flared and his mouth pressed into a thin, hard line. You know what? I'm done. If you can't trust me after 10 years, then maybe we shouldn't be married anymore. The words landed exactly how he meant them to. A threat. A weapon. The nuclear option he knew I'd been avoiding my entire marriage. Is that what you want? I asked. Divorce? I want a wife who doesn't treat me like a suspect. If you can't be that, then yeah. Maybe divorce is exactly what I want. He pushed past me, and this time I let him. He grabbed a pillow and a blanket from the closet and walked out without looking back. I heard him go downstairs, heard the couch creak as he threw himself onto it, heard the TV turn on because even in the middle of a fight he couldn't go 5 minutes without a screen. I stood in our bedroom doorway and realized something important. He hadn't denied it. He'd yelled. He'd deflected. He'd threatened divorce. But he never once looked me in the eyes and said there was nothing between him and Nikki. He couldn't. Because there was. I grabbed my keys and my purse and walked out the front door without telling him where I was going. He didn't ask. He didn't even look up from the TV. Nikki's apartment was 20 minutes away. I knew the route by heart because I'd driven there dozens of times with groceries when she said she couldn't afford food, with furniture when she said her place looked too empty, with a check for her security deposit when she first moved in because she'd blown through her savings on a trip to Cabo with friends. She called me crying 2 years ago, saying she was about to be homeless. I co-signed her lease. I covered her security deposit. I set up automatic transfers for her rent because she said dealing with money stressed her out. 2 years. $24,000. Plus her car insurance. Plus her phone bill. Plus random checks whenever she said she was struggling. I added it up once and stopped because the number made me sick. And the whole time I was funding her life, she was using that freedom to sleep with my husband. Every hour I spent at work to cover her bills was an hour she spent in my house with Damien. I parked in front of her building and took the stairs 2 at a time. It was almost 11 at night and I didn't care. I banged on her door hard enough that her neighbor opened theirs to see what was happening. Nikki, open the door, now. I heard movement inside. Footsteps. Then her voice, high and nervous. Carissa? What are you doing here? Open the door or I'll keep knocking until someone calls the cops. The lock clicked and the door opened 3 inches. Nikki's face appeared in the gap looking pale and scared. It's late. Can we talk tomorrow? No. I pushed the door hard and she stumbled backward as I walked into the apartment I funded. We're talking right now. You can't just barge in here. I pay your rent. I can do whatever I want. I looked around at the furniture I'd helped her pick out. The TV I'd bought her for Christmas. The couch where she probably sat texting my husband while I was at work paying for all of it. How long? Nikki wrapped her arms around herself. How long what? Don't play dumb with me. How long have you been sleeping with Damien? I'm not sleeping with Damien. I told you it was just rehearsal. Why won't you believe me? Because I saw your face when he touched you. I saw how natural it looked. That wasn't acting, Nikki. That was muscle memory. That was something you've done so many times your body did it without thinking. You're imagining things. Am I? Then explain why you know so much about my husband. Explain why you two have inside jokes I've never heard. Explain why he defends you more than he's ever defended me. Nikki's eyes darted toward her phone on the counter, looking for backup, looking for Damien to tell her what to say. He's not coming to save you, I said. I left him on the couch. It's just you and me. Sister to sister. Tell me the truth. There's nothing to tell. Fine. Then tell me this. I stepped closer and watched her step back. What's the birthmark on his left hip shaped like? Nikki's face went white. For 1 second she forgot to lie and I saw the answer in her eyes before she covered it up. I don't know what you're talking about. Yes, you do. You know exactly what I'm talking about because you've seen it. You've touched it. You've been close enough to my husband's body to know things only his wife should know. He showed me a photo once. It was a joke. Damien has never taken a photo of that birthmark in his life. He's self-conscious about it. He barely lets me see it. I laughed and it sounded unhinged even to me. But you know what it looks like because you've been in bed with him. How long, Nikki? How long have you been sleeping with my husband in the apartment I pay for? She didn't answer. She just stood there with her arms wrapped around herself and tears starting to form in her eyes. The same tears she'd used 100 times to get out of trouble. The same performance she'd been running since we were kids. I'm done, I said. Your rent payment stops today. Your car insurance stops today. Everything I've been paying for stops today. You want to take my husband? Fine. But you're going to do it without my money. Carissa, wait. You can't just cut me off. I don't have anywhere to go. Should have thought about that before you decided to destroy my marriage. I walked out and slammed the door behind me. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely hold my keys. I sat in my car for 5 minutes just breathing, just trying to process what I'd confirmed. My husband. My sister. In my house, on my money, behind my back. And they still expected me to stay home while they played happy couple at his reunion. That's when the idea hit me. Damien wanted to bring my sister as his fake wife. Fine. Then I'd bring his brother as my date. Jackson. The one who'd done everything right while Damien floated through life on charm and other people's money. Jackson had started his own business at 25. He owned his house outright. He'd offered Damien a job 3 different times, and Damien had turned him down each time because he said he couldn't work for his brother. The truth was, Damien couldn't stand being around someone who made him look bad just by existing. They barely spoke anymore. Jackson came to Christmas and Thanksgiving, and that was it. He was always polite to me at family events, and that was enough to convince me to go through with this. I'd walk into that reunion on Jackson's arm and watch Damien's face when he realized his wife showed up with the one person he could never measure up to. I pulled out my phone and found Jackson's number. We'd exchanged contacts years ago, but never actually texted. I stared at the screen for a long time before typing. Hi, Jackson. This is Carissa. I know this is random, but I need a favor. A big one. Can we meet tomorrow? Please don't tell Damien I reached out. I hit send before I could talk myself out of it. A minute passed, then 2. I was about to start the car when my phone buzzed. Is everything okay? I typed back. No. That's why I need your help. 3 dots appeared. Then his response came telling me to meet him for coffee tomorrow morning. Jackson met me at the coffee shop the next morning and listened to everything without interrupting once. When I finished, he didn't tell me I was crazy. He didn't make excuses for his brother. He just asked what I needed. And what I needed was simple. Damien had spent 10 years making me feel invisible. He'd spent months sneaking around with my sister while I paid for their lives. Now I was going to make him feel exactly what I felt. Paranoid. Jealous. Desperate for answers he wasn't going to get. Jackson was happy to help. The next morning I was putting on mascara when Damien appeared in the bathroom doorway. You're up early. His eyes moved over my outfit. The nice blouse. The jewelry I never wore anymore. Where are you going? Coffee with Jackson. The name landed like a grenade. His whole body went rigid. Jackson was the one person in the world who made Damien feel like nothing. Their parents had spent 30 years comparing them, and Damien lost every single time. Jackson built a company while Damien couldn't keep a cashier job. Jackson owned his house while Damien lived in mine. Every family dinner reminded him he was the disappointment and he'd hated his brother for it since they were kids. Cancel it. I kept applying mascara. No. I wasn't asking. He stepped into the bathroom and grabbed my phone off the counter before I could stop him. What's his number? I'll cancel it myself. Give me my phone, Damien. Or what? He held it above his head like we were children fighting over a toy. What are you going to do about it? I set down my mascara and looked at him. Really looked at him. This man I'd given 10 years to. This man who couldn't even let me have coffee without throwing a tantrum. I'm going to walk out of this house. I'm going to meet your brother. And when I get back, you're going to give me my phone and apologize for acting like a child. I grabbed my keys off the counter. Keep the phone. I'll get a new one. His arm dropped. Carissa, wait. I didn't wait. Jackson was already at the coffee shop when I arrived. He stood when he saw me and pulled me into a hug that lasted longer than it should have. He smelled expensive. Clean. Nothing like Damien's cheap cologne that had irritated my nose for a decade. You okay? He asked as we sat down. You look upset. Your brother took my phone hostage because I wanted to have coffee with you. Jackson's jaw tightened. That sounds like him. Does it? Because for 10 years I thought I was married to a reasonable person. Turns out I was married to a toddler who throws fits when he doesn't get his way. He's always been like that. He just hides it well at first. Jackson slid a coffee across the table. I ordered your usual. Hope that's okay. How do you know my usual? You've ordered the same thing at every family gathering for 5 years. Vanilla latte, extra shot, oat milk. He shrugged. I pay attention. Something in my chest cracked open. Damien didn't know my coffee order. We'd been married 10 years and he still asked me every single time like the information wouldn't stick. I told Jackson everything. The proposal story, the almost kiss on the couch, the birthmark slip, the way Damien had been gaslighting me for months while carrying on with my sister right under my nose. By the time I finished, my coffee was cold and my voice was hoarse. I want him to feel what I felt, I said. Paranoid. Jealous. Going crazy wondering what's happening. How? I need you around. Pick me up for dinners. Text me when he's watching. Make him wonder. Jackson was quiet for a moment. His thumb traced circles on the back of my hand. I'm in, he said. Whatever you need. When I got home 3 hours later, Damien was sitting in the dark living room like a horror movie villain. 3 hours. His voice was flat. You were gone 3 hours. We had a lot to talk about. About what? About me? About how terrible I am? Not everything is about you, Damien. I held out my hand. Phone. He pulled it from his pocket and threw it at me. Actually threw it. I caught it against my chest. There's your precious phone. Check your messages. I'm sure Jackson's been texting you nonstop like the desperate loser he is. The only desperate person in this room is you. I walked past him toward the stairs. I'm taking a shower. Try not to have a meltdown while I'm gone. The first dinner with Jackson was on Friday. I wore the black dress Damien said was too much for a Tuesday. Did my hair the way I used to before I stopped trying. When I came downstairs, Damien stood up so fast his chair fell over. No, absolutely not. Yes, absolutely yes. You're not leaving this house dressed like that to meet my brother. Watch me. He grabbed my arm, hard. Hard enough that I knew there would be bruises tomorrow. I said no. And I said yes. Let go of me. Make me. I looked at his hand on my arm, then at his face. Then I screamed. One loud, sharp scream that echoed through the house and probably reached the neighbors. He let go instantly. What the hell is wrong with you? Nothing. I just wanted to see how fast you'd release me if you thought someone might hear. I smoothed my dress. Now you know. And now I know exactly how to handle you. Jackson's headlights swept across the window. I walked out without looking back. Dinner was incredible. Not the food, though, that was good too. The conversation. The way Jackson asked about my work and actually listened. The way he remembered details from years ago that Damien had never bothered to learn. The way he looked at me like I was someone worth looking at. Friday again? He asked when he dropped me off. Friday again. The second dinner was even better. We closed down the restaurant talking about everything and nothing. He kissed my cheek when he walked me to the door, and I felt it for hours afterward. The third dinner was when everything changed. I came home at midnight expecting Damien to be pacing or sulking or throwing things. Instead, I found him on the couch with Nikki curled up against his side. Her shoes were off. Her head was on his shoulder. They were watching a movie like this was completely normal. Oh, hey. Damien didn't even look at me. How was your date? I stood in the doorway trying to process what I was seeing.